I'm Tejas Kumar, and I've been building on the web for over 20 years. Today, we're going to talk about AI, specifically specialized GPTs. OpenAI just released this feature where you can take something like ChatGPT, which is more of a generalist, and add domain-specific knowledge to it so it becomes an expert in certain things. And also launched a GPT store. So you can have Chef GPT, you can have Gym Bro GPT, you can have a number of different GPTs to solve specialized cases. In this video, we're going to learn about how to make your own and how to add knowledge to it. And we're going to do a number of things in and around that ecosystem so you can best build your own GPT, including teaching it complex programming languages that don't exist. We're going to do that through using Keel. For those of you who don't know, I've been using Keel for a while as a backend, and I absolutely love it, right? The gist of it is you write one schema file, similar to a Prisma schema, and when you push that to Git and connect your GitHub repo to Keel, it becomes full infrastructure. Postgres, Neon, AWS exists. And the basis of your entire backend is this one schema file. It's open source, and I made another video about it. I'll put a link up there if you're interested. But the gist of it is this. You write a schema in the Keel schema language, git push, full backend. That's great, but the Keel schema language can be a source of friction because people have to learn another language. Not only do they have to learn another language, it has its own intricacies and things that you maybe don't expect, right? The Keel schema language is similar to Prisma. It's similar to HCL or HashiCorp configuration language, which is used with things like Terraform, but it's not JSON. It's not something that you just know. And so wouldn't it be awesome to have a custom GPT to teach you this language, to maybe generate schemas for you and then tell you where your schema is invalid? So we're going to do that and learn how these custom GPTs work, literally teaching a language that most humans and computers just don't know to a GPT and making it an expert in that. To do that, we're going to do a number of things, including adding training data and what that looks like in this context of custom GPTs. We're going to compile the Keel binaries to WebAssembly and then run them in Java. There's so many different things we're going to do, and it's going to be a fun ride, so buckle up. To get started, let's look at OpenAI's store. So they have this thing now with all these different GPTs, Game Time, the Cosmic Dream, the Tech Support Advisor, and these are all specialized variants of ChatGPT. My favorite is the Gensfo meme. Okay, and so we're going to create our own one of these, that is this Keel GPT, and we're going to understand how to do it and how to give it specific knowledge. Before we get into it, let's talk about Keel so we understand it as humans, and then we can together tell the computer how it works. Keel works like this. There's a schema. Um, you have a model and you have fields on the model. This is the extent of a Prisma schema. In fact, a Prisma schema might look like this, right? More or less. So you have fields that have types. Identity is a built-in type, but there's text, there's numbers, etc. And document references another model called document somewhere down here, this one. Okay, so you can have relationships. But not only do you define fields, you define actions you can do on those fields. Actions like get, write, create, update, and delete, just CRUD. And get and list are somewhat different because this returns one, this returns an array, etc. Finally, you can have permissions for specific actions with specific expressions. In this case, what we're saying is to do any of these, the user's identity needs to match the context identity, meaning the user that submitted the request needs to match the context identity, meaning you just need to be logged in. So you can only do this stuff if you're logged in. Similar teams work the same. They have some permissions and some operations. And this is really the gist of any Keel schema is you write models, and then you describe what you can do on those models with actions, and then you define the permissions. And if you have those, you're kind of good, okay? And once you git push this, it becomes full backend infrastructure using like Postgres and AWS. It's kind of nuts. And of course, when you change this in your Git repo over time, your backend just gets migrated. It's kind of cool. So how can we now teach how can we build a custom GPT and then teach it that language? To do that, let's use OpenAI's own configurator. So if we come here, we'll create a GPT, it's beta. And they have this GPT builder where, let's bump the font size, where you can literally tell it in natural language what to make, and it will build it for you. The programming language of custom GPTs is English, apparently. And I think this is the first time I think in human history where we have a parser for natural language that's good enough to transpile that into other code. So let's do that. What would you like to make? I want to make a Keel expert that teaches and corrects and generates Keel schema language. Okay. Let's see what it comes up with. Does it even know what Keel is? So it's immediately not telling me anything, just updating GPT, whatever that means. And in a couple seconds, we should have a actual model. Okay, there we go. GPT behavior updated. Let's give this GPT a name related to its expertise in Keel schema language. What about calling it Keel guide? That works. Cool. Next, it's going to update the model with the name, and it's going to generate a profile picture using dall-e. For those of you who don't know, for those of you who don't know, excuse me, dall-e is the name of a model that generates images. It's a text-to-speech generative model by OpenAI, similar to Midjourney or Stable Diffusion, and it literally just makes images. So it just made me an avatar. I think it's cool. That's great. And look, we have a GPT kind of already existing with some pre-filled prompts. Um, what specific types of tasks or questions do you envision this GPT handling? This could range from teaching basics to handling complex schema problems. Um, and it's just updating the GPT. So I guess I don't even need to answer in this case. Um, cool. What should be emphasized or avoided in its responses? I guess it's just kind of recursively looping on itself. I'm not responding, but it seems to be just updating the GPT based on its own input. Um, so I'd like to see if I just end up with a model in this case. I suspect I might. GPT behavior updated. Okay. How would you like it to approach situations where it might need more information? Oh, it just, yeah, okay, so this is kind of awesome. It's just doing it. It's anticipating my answers and then just answering itself. I don't know if this is broken behavior because it's beta or not, but it seems to just kind of be having a field day. So um, let's take a look. It's almost done updating its generate. This is kind of nuts, huh? This is a little bit AI in AI. Let's personalize its interaction style, and it's just doing that. Okay. Cool. This is like, I don't know if you're Marvel fans, but in the Marvel comics there's these things called LMDs, or life model decoys. They're basically AIs with bodies, and they discover how to make more LMDs, and then they just take over the world. So anyway, it's done. The schema is now known as Keel Guide. It's all set up. It's friendly. You can teach, correct, and generate schemas. You can try it out in the playground to the right. After testing, let me know if there's any refinements you want to make. Okay, good. So let's um tell me the basics of Keel schema language. Let's maybe start here and see what happens. It's still called untitled. That's funny. To define the data model in various applications, it's particularly useful for defining how data is structured, validated, and transformed. This is maybe not true. Um, Inheritance. Okay, this is also maybe not true. So yeah, this is definitely not a Keel schema. As we saw, stop. As we saw, this is JSON. It even knows it's JSON, but it thinks it's doing us a favor, creating something like this, right? Which it's absolutely not. Okay. Help. So what we need to do is we need to give it context. And there's two ways we can do it. We could just like literally keep prompting this over and over again, but it doesn't know the language. It's not trained on the Keel schema didn't exist publicly until like last month. So it just doesn't know what. So we can maybe try, but let's go. So that's JSON, not the Keel schema language. Let's see. So it's now updating the GPT to somehow, I don't, it'd be cool if it shows you what's happening here. Um, okay, so the behavior updated, and so now this will probably say new GPT at some point. Wait, is now specifically tailored as an expert in Keel for Kubernetes applications. That's not what I want. And this is because the current Keel.sh is a Kubernetes tool, but I'm talking about a different Keel. It just doesn't know that because its training data isn't up to date. So we're going to need to decouple this from Kubernetes and say, no, this is a new thing. How do we do that? We get more advanced configuration options in this configure tab. So to start with, let's remove all references to Kubernetes. This is not true. Expert in Keel, the um, Keel schemas, okay? A declarative language used to define Kubernetes applications is not true. Um, okay, this is cool. You will assist users in understanding, writing correct Keel schemas, offer clear explanations, practical examples, blah, blah, blah. This is great. And what you'll notice is this is called a system prompt. In at least OpenAI models, there's a system prompt where you tell the system this is who you are, and then users prompt it and it responds in that style. You could literally be like, you are a pirate, and whenever a user sends, give me the time of day of my whatever, it will respond with arg matey. Like it does that. Okay, so this is the system prompt. these are fine, but here's an interesting thing. You can upload knowledge. And not only can you upload knowledge, you have other capabilities like interpreting code and image generation. Let's turn this on, turn off. I don't really want images. But what can we do with knowledge? Well, can we just upload documentation? Um, this is a great start. The Keel documentation is totally public. It's right here, and everything lives in pages. And from what I can see, it's just a bunch of MDX. So should we just upload some MDX and see what happens? Let's try. So if we come back here, we'll upload files. And what we'll do is I was just playing a little bit, so we'll git reset. I have the docs repo here cloned locally. And I was playing with some stuff. So we'll upload files, and we'll go with let's go with what is Keel, and we'll go with maybe models, and just see if that works. Okay. Is there anything about language here? Probably not. Okay. So we've added some context. Let's try this again. Um, Explain or write a Keel schema for a to-do app. And let's see what happens. Notice it's still untitled. It's a bit beta, but here. So analyzing, I'm assuming is going to, yeah, it's just reading what is keel.mdx. It seems that there was an error analyzing the content. Um, okay, it's giving it another try, which it's nice that it can retry. And it failed again. Um, okay, so now it's, wow, I don't know where it got that language, but this is an entirely different language. It's not the Keel language because you don't have colons, for example, but it's trying, it's getting better. Let's try again. Create a Keel schema for a to-do app. And it's probably going to, okay, this is ish. So yes, it kind of gets it. Let me stop. So it kind of gets it, but this is still a wrong schema. It's not accurate information, and this will cause more problems and solutions if people use this to work with Keel. We also know that it probably can't read MDX. Let's maybe convert the MDX to Markdown and try then. So what we'll do is we'll get rid of this, we'll get rid of this, and we'll go here, and we'll .md. So we'll do this. We're finding in the current directory files named star.mdx, and we just like execute this command, which is just we move them to .md files, okay, recursively there. So now if we do this, but instead of mdx, we do md, let's try what is Keel, and we'll just upload the basics. What is Keel, models, um, actions, and permissions, right? I think there's docs for that, actions and permissions. Um, Let's try this again. Last time I tried to read the MDX through code interpreter because MDX isn't recognized as text, but notice now it doesn't have the code interpreter piece. Let's try this again. Write me a schema for a to-do app. Okay, upload. It's analyzing again. Oh, it's just text. It's opening the markdown file, reading the file, the first 2,000 characters. It also had an issue, and I don't know if this is because it's beta, and so it's doing it again, but I don't, let's see what it comes up with. Yeah, this is the wrong schema language once more. Okay, so again, it tries to read Markdown or MDX and fails. And these two are not standard text. I think that's the problem. So one final try. Let's go from MDX to Markdown to just text. Let's turn this whole repo into text files. So we'll come here, we'll git reset hard, clean df. And now instead of MDX, we'll replace things not to .md, but to .txt. Okay, we'll run that. And we'll upload, wait, let's get rid of this. We'll upload, once again, as text this time, what is Keel? The index file, probably, that's the homepage of the docs. Models, where's models? Models are really important. Actions, permissions, okay? And we're just kind of looking at our schema here. Model, fields, actions, permissions. I think that's kind of standard. Okay, so now let's try that again. Write me a Keel schema for a to-do app. Let's see what happens. Okay, so far it involves defining the data models and the actions that can be performed on these models. The schema will include the model to-do items, possible models to use in project, etc. So here we go. This is, I think, pretty valid Keel schema. Um, we got that from, this is actually really valid Keel schema. I kind of dig it. In fact, I wonder if there would be any problems. So this looks good, but let's now take this. Um, gosh, the copy code button is missing. Anyway, we can just do this old school. So we'll take the schema and paste it in VS Code. And okay, it looks actually pretty nice, but it just defined one model. But the syntax is more or less accurate. Um, kind of nuts. Kind of nuts that it's just text files that we've given it 5 text files, and it just works. What if we give it more? Should we give it more? I think at this point we don't really know if the model is outputting accurate schema or not. Like this is cool, I guess, but the only real way we'll know if this is valid is if we pass it through some type of validator, or if we try to deploy it to Keel ourselves. But all of this would take time. We need to create an account, and we need to create a project, we need to commit it to GitHub, etc., etc. It would be cool if there was a fast validator. So let's make a validator. To do that, we dig into the Keel source code. So let's describe the flow we want. What we actually want is to um, take schema and validate it after. So we want this GPT to run a validation step after generating a schema. Every time you generate a schema, I want you to run the validator. How do we do that? Well, Keel has in the, if we go to the SaaS starter, this is a classic example. This is actually the example here before I replaced it. It's just for a SaaS app. It has the Keel CLI, at least at version 3.7, has Keel validate, and it says everything's looking good. And if I mess this up, so if I do txt Keel validate, okay, this is great. In fact, I could just replace the schema with the one from OpenAI here, right? And now we can Keel validate. And indeed, it's not accurate because user.email is text and context identity is identity. This is actually really nice error output. And indeed, we see that here, all right? It's on line 43. User.email is context identity. We're saying text. We're comparing text with context identity, whose type is identity. Of course, OpenAI doesn't know that, and that's the problem. Okay, how do we get this validation feedback into OpenAI? Well, there's some things we can do. So actions. What are actions? Actions are API endpoints that OpenAI via these GPTs can call based on natural language, literally. So it can like call an endpoint that when you say trigger words, it can like invoke this endpoint. Okay, so what we need then is to take this Keel validate from the command line and run it over HTTP somewhere in a serverless function. The Keel validate command is a CLI command built in Golang. How do we do that? Well, let's find its source code and go from there. So Keel is open source. This is Keel, the official like repo. And if we go diving here, if we go to packages, wasm, there's WebAssembly bindings for their Go API, right? So in theory, all this should be available over WebAssembly. They have lib with a Golang module and some standard. You need these to run Go in WebAssembly. Um, that's what we're going to do. So I actually built this. Let's walk through the code and then look at how we query it. So if we go here, let's z to Keel validator. I built this. It's actually open. Actually, let's just go to github.com/stagesq/Keel validator. This is my take on that. So if we come here, let's open it here. So let's look at the code here. In fact, let's give ourselves some more space. Okay, so entry point is init.ts, and here's what we do. We import from lib wasm exec node. This is given to us by the Golang repo, right? And in this, if global this.keel, we just return it, so it's a memoized function. If not, we instantiate Go. This is global, given to us by this. We require lib wasm.js, which is loading the module into WebAssembly, and then we do that. We WebAssembly.instantiate, we give it the wasm module, we go import the we give an import object. So this just tells WebAssembly how to like use it. We get the instance and we run the instance, and this then attaches Keel, as in from here, right, from here to the global namespace here. And so from there, we can do something like Keel dot, it's not get Keel, it's just Keel dot validate. We can literally do that. And it's, and you know, I did write some types, so it's not fully problematic, but exactly. So we get stuff like this, okay? And this is just by WebAssembly. So again, WebAssembly gives us these lib files, wasm exec node and wasm exec, as we saw from here. So we take those, but we have this Go, and we need to cross compile Go to WebAssembly. How do we do that? Well, if we go to let's go here, z Keel, just Keel, z packages. I think this should be fine. Yeah, so we're in the wasm directory, and what we'll run, we just need to have the .go file somewhere, okay? So if we're in wasm, we need to go to lib, and here the Go file lives, but you'll notice there's a main.wasm. We just literally like compile that by saying Go OS is JavaScript, Go architecture is wasm, and we go build main.wasm, just like that. And that's how main.wasm exists. But then how do we get a JavaScript file? How do we get wasm.js from it? Well, we turn that into a big byte string, and we just, you know, we basically do this. We convert it back to binary and pass it. And the reason for this is interesting. It's because serverless functions can't, they oftentimes remove .wasm files, but keep .js files. So we take the same .wasm file, and by changing some bytes around, we turn it into a JavaScript file that is later decoded, but it's basically the same. We encode it and then decode it, okay? That's kind of what we're doing here, okay? So with that, what can we do? Well, we have now the possibility to do a number of things, because you can get Keel, and when you get Keel, when you await get Keel, you get Keel literally. So we do test-driven development. So now I have validate test, right? And we await Keel.validate after we call get Keel, and we give it these schema files. And again, this is typed based on the API that the golang validate function expects. And we say for this file name, read this file and tell me if it's valid or not. You give nice errors when it's invalid as well. So we sanitize the errors. We literally call a function sanitize validation errors, and we basically reduce over them to give English errors so that ChatGPT can read and understand them and parse them nicely. Okay, so we give them these errors. Now that we have this function and it's working, the next thing we need to do is host it somewhere. Well, why don't we just host it on Keel? Keel is a backend after all. So we have a schema.keel with a validation model and actions, and read generates server functions. So read takes this input, returns that output, and can be called by anyone. Okay, and this is just the input schema, the output schema. So it expects a schema as text in and returns errors out as text also. When we, in this repo, if we run something like Keel generate, it will generate functions for us. That's what happened here. And you just fill in this portion. All of the other stuff's handled. So what I'm doing is I get the schema, I get Keel, and I validate the schema there, and I return sanitized validation errors in the errors key. Okay, that's it. Now I git push this to Keel, and it becomes a backend. In fact, if I go to console.keel.so, what we'll see is my validator app. It's deployed, it's connected to Tejas Keel Validator, and I have a number of builds every time I tried. Why is auth always an afterthought, etc. And it's deployed, and I have an API that I can call. I literally have and so from here, I can download the API definitions as JSON. This is really important for OpenAI, because OpenAI requires OpenAPI, excuse me, definitions for endpoints it expects to call, and uses those descriptions to know when to call the endpoint. So this exists. This is great. I'm going to now get my API definitions, and ooh, I have live ones. I actually don't want the live ones. I'm going to download those um, and open them in VS Code. So we'll just open these in VS Code. We'll format this document, and I don't want authenticate endpoints. I don't want anything really other than just the validate endpoints for OpenAI. So let's get rid of all of this reset password stuff. It's nice that Keel gives you auth out of the box, but I don't want it in this case. Okay. So now API JSON validate, and the description is what our GPT is going to read. So use this to validate schemas, and it will read that and understand, okay, I will call this when I want to validate schema. And input object to send to the schema validator. These descriptions need to be really clear so that OpenAI knows when to call them. Um, a response from the schema validator, right? If errors are empty, this is good. If not, um, take the errors and redo the schema and try again. Okay? So we have this, and I kind of like it. We don't need the email password input as well. So we'll take this and we'll go to our GPT constructor and we'll add an action. And notice it asks for a schema. So we paste the schema here. Um, and it should be good, except we have some problems. Okay, what are the problems? Well, let's inspect the network. I wish it would tell me the errors here, but it doesn't, and that's fine. I'm a developer. I kind of know what I'm doing. So let's do this again. So we do that, and it should, yeah, there's an error, which is could not parse your authentication token. Please try signing in again. Okay, I'll just reload the page. Great. Ooh, number of things. Okay, so let's come here and add actions. We'll ideally, it can parse my authentication token now. Great, it did. And so what we see is interesting error message. None of the provided servers is under the root origin of this. What does that mean exactly? What that means is OpenAI needs a way to confirm that I own that website, because my action, my GPT should be able to call endpoints that I own, that nobody, it's a security measure, okay? And so how do we implement that? Well, there's documentation you can read in OpenAI. I can tell you this basically. You need a file at the root of your service under a directory .well-known slash AI plugin.yaml or .json. You need like a manifest hosted at the root of your domain under a .well-known directory. In the case of Keel, we'd need, for example, if we're saying this staging Keel validator or whatever, we'd need this slash well-known slash AI plugin.json. We would need this. And of course, it doesn't exist. It says not found. So OpenAI is like, that sucks. I can't trust you. And since it can't trust me, it's going to ignore me. This is a very, very good security measure. Okay, how can we now work with that? Keel deploys things to slash API only. Keel doesn't deploy static files to the root of our endpoint. Dang, what do we do? Well, how can we deploy a serverless function with root access, domain root access, and then proxy the request to Keel? Can we do that? Indeed, we can. So let's build that. So we have the Keel proxy, I think. Yeah, Keel Validator proxy. This is another project I made, and it's not fancy. It's just a proxy. Here's what it looks like. So we'll code, we'll open it up, and what we see is this is an extremely basic application. So it's a Next.js app, and in public slash well-known slash AI plugin, we have the manifest. This is in the OpenAI docs, right? And so here we have this validate Keel schemas with this, nothing really special. We have this, it's great. And then we have an app API JSON validate a route handler, where on options you respond with some CORS headers that says everything's fine. It also runs at the edge. But on post requests, we just literally take the body, await it, and we just proxy the request to my Keel thing. That's literally all we do, and we return the response. Right? That's all we're doing. So it's just a little proxy. We deploy this to Vercel, and we go here, and instead of whatever staging Keel, whatever, we replace this with Keel validator dash proxy. Okay, this looks good. It should probably tell me that, but let's do it again. Create a schema for a to-do app. Same drill. And maybe I should edit this out. Maybe I shouldn't. Let's see. So far, so good. Okay, let's pass this through our current validator. Yes, I'm running a lot of things, I know. Okay, there's a bunch of issues here. Let's see if it picks it up. Validate this. Oh, let's automate. Okay, I got you. So it should now see that the user identity refers to a model which cannot be used as an input. So it even gives you a hint. Inputs must target fields on models only. So user.id instead of user.identity. So we'll allow, and it'll do its thing. An error validating the schema. Well, yes, retry. Let's go back and just use my Keel GPT here. Every step until this point has been exactly the same, right? So we'll say create a schema for a to-do app. It's referencing literally the same serverless function, the same validator. All of the links will be under the like button, of course. Um, it's not a lot of stuff. Probably the most complex thing was compiling the WebAssembly binary to Go, but even that you saw was one command. So okay. So for the basic to-do app in Keel, we'll do this. Great, it looks good. What? This is very beta. But okay. Come on. I will now validate the schema. Fantastic. Let's do it. Keel validator proxy.vercel.app. Maybe this is going to fail and my function's just down. But I'm not sure because like it was up before making the video. But let's see. Let's allow this. And after calling my edge function, it should have some errors. Okay, what do you have? Schema validation indicates an error. Error in create to do, etc., etc., etc. Let's correct the schema. So now it self-corrects the schema. And it keeps going. So what was the error anyway? The create to do action must include all required fields without a default value in its width inputs via a set expression. Okay, whatever. Let's revalidate the schema. This handshake once again takes a while to recognize that it's about to send a schema, etc. I think it actually generates the request. I think that's what takes time. But once it generates the request and it's about to send it, it asks me for permission to send it. So we will allow, and now it'll revalidate. I could revalidate the schema faster than this. I guess not. Ooh, the revised schema is now valid and error-free. It literally generated a valid schema for me. Tremendous. And it did it fast. I didn't even know. And I've used it since then to generate a number of schemas, even like modeling a tic-tac-toe game at the database level. It can do that. It can do a lot of things. And it knows the language. It knows the language. So if we come back here, fix my model, and we'll just take, I don't know, we'll take a model like this, and we'll say, instead of, let's just mess it up a little bit, and we'll say name is txt. Can it fix my model appropriately? So it should now, of course, catch that. Oof, change txt to text. It is not a valid type in Keel. Ooh, wow, wow, wow. And so the model is now aligned with Keel. So it knows stuff. We can say add actions to it. And it knows now the it we're talking about is contextual. To enhance your user model with actions, let's add a set of basic CRUD actions. Oh my goodness, look at that. And it's got permissions, it's got comments in line, all of this from our validation and so on. But let's make sure this is valid actually. So now let's do this and let's go run our validator. So we'll go to, whoa, we'll go to Keel validate, and there's an issue. Aha, let's see. It's going to recognize if it validates that the to-do model doesn't exist and so on, right? Because that's what this says. Field to-dos has unsupported type to-do. So let's see what happens. And it's going to recognize that to-do doesn't exist, maybe, and it's going to create it. Anyway, this is a rabbit hole we could spend infinite time on. It's already been 40 minutes, so let's wrap up. But when the validation results become available, I will share them with you. I just need to come here quickly and click allow. And now this should take maybe 10 seconds. Okay. The schema, there's an error, to-dos. Okay, cool. And now are you going to make it? Ooh. Okay, so it's just assuming to do is correctly defined. It knows when not to over-engineer. Great. In terms of extra considerations, I want to share with you one thing that has been really helpful, and that's adding enough context. So for example, we looked at knowledge and how MDX didn't work and Markdown didn't work, and so text. I want to encourage you, you can add right now a maximum of 10 text files or 10 files for knowledge. but there's a seemingly unknown bound on the size limit of those files. So if you run out of the file limit, 10 files, just make big files. Concatenate all of your text files or markdown files into one big text file. And when you reach the size limit there, you can have 10 of those, right? That's something that I've done here. I literally condensed all of Keel's documentation ever into context by concatenating every single piece into a text file and I put it here. And that's just one file. So I'd encourage you to think a little bit outside the box, create models, teach languages to these GPTs, engineer and build great things that help people now. And if somebody wants to get started with Keel, if they have questions with an existing schema or they want a basic schema, it will create a fully valid schema that they can then put in a project, git push, and get full backend infrastructure. Isn't that nuts? Literally, it went from Kubernetes not knowing what Keel even was to now being a professional at generating these schemas and debugging them. It's kind of nuts. I hope this has been helpful. If you're learning from and or enjoying this content, just know that I don't have a job. I have a small agency, but like this is my effort to give you information for free. And there's a number of different free ways you could support me, which doesn't actually cost you anything. One way is by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing the link on social media with your friends. I would really appreciate that. If you leave comments, I read all of them and I'm happy to respond to you as well. Thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for watching this, and thank you for letting me play a little bit. I hope this has been helpful and I hope that you've learned a lot. Thank you for your interest in engineering. Peace.